Hey folks, and welcome back to West Yorkshire Retro Gamer. Leeds United have started the season with a very symmetrical list of results. They've won 2, drawn 2 and lost 2. So, this got me thinking, could Leeds keep this form up the entire season? So I thought I'd have a look at it. So I had a look at all the fixtures and I have compiled a prediction as to where Leeds could potentially get 2 wins, 2 draws and 2 losses every 6 games. So, could Leeds keep this form up every 6 games for the rest of the season? If they could, it comfortably keeps them in the division without a shadow of a doubt. Can't see us getting relegated with this amount of points. But let's see if it's realistic. So, we started with a win against Everton, got a heavy loss against Arsenal, bit of a write-off that one. Good draw against Newcastle. The loss against Fulham was very unlucky. A very solid win against Wolves, and a draw, which was very nearly a win, against Bournemouth. I have to apologise. Kids are all coming out of school and shouting their heads off. So, just so you're aware, if you're wondering why some of these are in capitals and some of these are not, the matches in capitals are at Ellen Road at home, and in lowercase are away games. So, this is the first 6 out of the way. So the question is, who do we have in the next 6? This lot. So, we've got Tottenham. Now, outside of this whole trend that we're looking at here regarding each block of 6 and the potential for 2 wins, 2 draws and 2 losses within those 6, some of these blocks of 6 have been easier to predict than others. And with the form that Leeds are in at the moment and the form that they're in at Ellen Road, we are currently unbeaten. It made me wonder if there is any kind of slim chance that we could actually get something out of Tottenham. So deep down I think that there is a possibility of us maybe nicking a draw, considering that Tottenham have just drawn with Wolves, who Leeds beat. But for the purpose of this exercise that we're looking at on the video, I have had to put a loss against Tottenham. Burnley, before the season kicked off, was a team that we had to target 2 wins against, both home and away. We've got our away fixture at Turf Moor coming up after the Tottenham game, and so therefore I believe this is one that we need to win, and I think we will win. I think we will have too much for them in the end. Moving on to West Ham at Ellen Road. Again, I've had to take into account what fixtures we've got within this block of 6. Now, West Ham, if they still had Potter, I think we would beat West Ham fairly comfortable. Similar kind of result to the Wolves game, I think. However, they have ditched Potter and brought in Nintendo Entertainment System. I have to call him that because it shows Nez on his jacket, doesn't it? Nuno Espirito Santo has become their new manager. And despite this, I think that we could still win this game, A, because we're at home, and B, he won't have had a lot of time to implement his own ideas. And none of the squad will be his. These are all players signed by all the previous managers. So we might just be catching West Ham at a time where they haven't quite gelled yet. Away to Brighton, I have had to put the loss next to them. We don't have an amazing record against Brighton as far as I remember, and we're not very good at travelling away games to either London or any of them in the south. Obviously these kind of records are designed to be broken, of course, but you know, despite Brighton having a bit of a dodgy start to the season, I think by that point they'll have probably fixed the form somewhat. So that's where the other losses are coming from this block of 6, leaving the final 2 matches of this block as draws. The first one being away at Nottingham Forest, and then at home against Aston Villa. I think the Villa one is doable. They're sticking with Unai Emery for the minute, but their form has not been that great, and they have been quite draw heavy within their first 6 games. So I don't think that a draw against Villa is too unrealistic at Ellen Road. The draw against Forest have just appointed Ange Postecoglou, who doesn't have an amazing record in the Premier League as a manager just yet, and he hasn't made a fantastic start with Nottingham Forest either. So I think a draw at their place would not be super unrealistic. So moving on to block 3. Now this was a very difficult block to assess because we have some absolute stinkers in this group. Away at Man City, I think we're gonna suffer like we did against Arsenal. I don't see this being a very enjoyable experience, quite frankly. Now, Man City, by their standards, have not been uber fantastic this season, but it's just not a fixture that I think is going to suit Leeds. I really don't. I'm going to come back to the Chelsea one. The other loss I've put, even though we are at home, I have put a loss against Liverpool, because apart from them losing against their recent bogey side Crystal Palace, they are currently completely unbeaten with a whole bunch of wins under their belt. And I think we'll give them a game at Ellen Road, but I think that Liverpool probably will win that one. So I've had to put the loss there. But it was very difficult. Those first 3 fixtures in this block of 6, it was very difficult to actually decide as to which one we could potentially get a draw out of. We could potentially lose all 3. And it wouldn't be a disgrace if we did. As long as we don't get hammered, like what happened against Arsenal. As I said, that was a very early game this season. By this point, by this block of fixtures, we will have implemented our style and gotten, all the players will be, far more used to what Farke's wanting out of them at this point. The 2 wins in terms of this block were pretty self-explanatory. You've got Sunderland, who before a ball had been kicked was another team, like Burnley, that we had to target 2 wins from, and even though Sunderland have had a very good start to the season, and even though it is away at the Stadium of Light, it's still a match that we have to target to win. And as far as Brentford's concerned, I was never convinced with Brentford as soon as they appointed Keith Andrews as a manager. I think that will be a massive mistake on Brentford's part. And Brentford are currently within the bottom 5, something like that. And I don't think that their form will drag them too far away from that area of the table. So those 2 wins within this block of 6 was pretty self-explanatory. That then means that when we play Crystal Palace at Ellen Road, it will be a draw, because that only left Crystal Palace and Chelsea after deciding the wins and losses. The Palace draw again. Palace look very decent this season, like better than usual. They're usually mid-table and have been mid-table for God knows how long, but something's clicking. Glasner's got them purring, and at this point they are they're unbeaten. I think it's something like 3 wins and 3 draws they've had, so it's an excellent start for Crystal Palace, really. And that's despite them losing, players that have been, good for them in the past, like Zaha and Eze and Elise. Players like these are very good, and they've gone, and it helped them keeping Mark Gay in defence. I think that was probably something that probably boosted the confidence of the squad, knowing they were going to keep their best centre back. So I don't know. And then with Chelsea, it was just out of that first half of this block, where was a more likely draw going to come out of those 3? And I think that the Chelsea matches, it's at Ellen Road. Leeds have a little bit of history against Chelsea, going back a long time. So maybe. And we have beaten Chelsea in, only a few years ago, when we beat them 3-0. I remember Brendan Aronson pouncing on a mistake from Mendy, the goalkeeper, and was gifted a goal there. So yeah, that's that block. That was a difficult one, in terms of which 2 of those 3 was going to be losses and which one was potentially going to be a draw. So, moving on to the next block. Again, a couple of difficult ones to determine on this one. But again, I would say that the 2 losses are probably fairly obvious. Starting with Liverpool at Anfield, don't think we'll get anything there. And then, even though it'll be at Ellen Road, I don't think Leeds are going to get revenge for that big loss. I think it will probably be another loss. It might be a bit tighter. I don't see it being another 5-0. I think Leeds will show a bit more steel and a little bit more defensive nous. But I still think it'll be a pair of losses at the very start and very end of this block of 6. And then you might think that maybe the wins and draws should have been switched with this one because of the form of Manure, Newcastle, Fulham and Everton. And also maybe the fact that, on paper, Manure and Newcastle are bigger clubs than Fulham and Everton. However, football's not played on paper, it's played on grass. If Manure still have Amorim by this point, I have a feeling we could even win that at Ellen Road, let alone draw it. This is the very start of the new year as well by this point. Calendar year, that is. Another draw against Newcastle I don't think would be completely unrealistic. It'll be tougher at St James's Park than it was at Ellen Road, but I think it could be doable. I think Leeds will get revenge for that really unlucky loss that we had against Fulham. I think at Ellen Road, I think Leeds will be a tougher nut to crack, and I think we might just nick a win there. And with Everton, it was a very very close match between Leeds and Everton in the very first match of the season. But I think we could do the double on them. I think I'm coming down with a cold, folks, so I'm having to drink through this video, so I do apologise. But yeah, it's a bit of a strange looking block, that one. As I said, the 2 losses I think are pretty self-explanatory. But with the draws and wins, yeah, you could argue the draws and wins could be mixed in any kind of combination between those four, I would say. So, moving on to the next block of 6. And this is the final block of 6. The reason I say that, the very last block has to be 8 because there's 8 games remaining. And I had to squeeze the final 2 fixtures in somehow. So there we go. So, we start this block at home against Nottingham Forest. Then away to Chelsea, away to Aston Villa, at home against Man City, at home against Sunderland, and away to Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park. So, bit of a mixed bag this one really, and not necessarily the easiest block to kind of decide on. So, with Nottingham Forest at home, if we assume that they are likely to still have Postecoglou as manager, I think we can beat them at home. I really do. Stamford Bridge, Chelsea. London's not a happy hunting ground for Leeds United. So I think it's fairly self-explanatory where the two. Again, this block is another one that I think is quite self-explanatory for where the losses will come from. I mean, again, I hope I'm wrong. I hope we don't lose any game at all, but I have to be realistic. So I think we probably pick up a loss there. Away at Aston Villa, it's always been quite even-ish between Leeds and Villa over the years. Two teams with similar size stadiums, similar size history. Just certain similarities. The two big clubs, aren't they? Overall, and I think that a draw again. I mean, there's every chance that. I mean, again, especially if they keep Emery and if their form doesn't improve that dramatically, then a draw at Villa Park could be on the cards. I don't think it's dramatically unrealistic that one. Man City then come to Ellen Road. I mean, I would like to think that we would have a very slim chance of staying unbeaten at Ellen Road all season, or mixture of wins and draws. This is Premier League. I think to stay unbeaten at home in the Championship is very doable, but at this level, I have to be realistic. And by sticking to this format of 2 wins, 2 draws, 2 losses, I have to put a loss somewhere. So it's not, it's not wrong for me to put losses next to playing Chelsea and Man City. Sunderland again, as I said before, it's the reverse fixture and it's at Ellen Road. We have to win that one. At this later stage of the season, every win's going to be crucial, and I think that again we have to do the double on Sunderland. I think it just, as I say, as good as Sunderland have been so far, the wheels have to come off at some point. You would think the difference in squad quality is going to come to the fore, especially if they get injuries and suspensions as well. And then that leaves another draw with Crystal Palace. I mean, again, is Crystal Palace's form going to stick for the entire season? Could they do an invincible season and stay unbeaten the whole season? I mean, it's unlikely. But, the first block of 6, 3 wins, 3 draws suggests that there's a slight chance they could. So, yeah, I don't see a draw being unrealistic against Palace. But again, it is London. It's a bit of a dodgy stomping ground, really. So, realistically, I mean, if we did lose to Crystal Palace, if their form's really good all season, and if we go away in London, could be anything, but we'll see. So So moving on to the final block, and as you'll see here, folks, there are 8 fixtures in this final block. So I decided to go with an extra win and an extra draw. Let's keep things nice and positive. So we're looking at 3 wins, 3 draws and 2 losses from the final 8 games. And this was actually a very difficult block to judge, because I don't think it's a bad running. I really don't. I think this is a, this is a run-in where, we genuinely could get some points. And final 8 to 10 games of the season, if you can get points in that bracket, you're going to give yourselves every chance of staying up, aren't you? So, at home against Brentford, this is one that's got, we really have to win that one, don't we? I mean, if Keith Andrews is still in his job by that point, we'll have to see. But, I mean, certainly if he's still in the job, I would think that we would beat them at Ellen Road. Manure, again, I'd love to say that, we could get 2 wins against Manure all season. But, again, you can't say that drawing against Manure would be unrealistic. We drew against them in the friendly in the summer, and we didn't look out of place at all. We kept things very tight defensively, and we had one or two chances in that game as well. And with their form, I mean, again, it really depends on, will they sign anyone in January? Will they have kept Amorim by this point? That if they keep Amorim, and if they're in the relegation zone, maybe, if the form really does tail off a cliff. I mean, it's pretty close to the cliff edge right now. They're not doing that well. They got knocked out of the cup by Grimsby, for Christ's sake. It says a lot. So I don't think a draw is unrealistic. I think we can do the double over Wolves. We look good for large parts of that game against Wolves. And the most important thing, we were clinical. Very clinical. I'll come back to the Bournemouth loss. As I said, this group of 8 was very difficult to decide where the losses were going to come from. Burnley, again, we've got to do the double on them. We have to. The potentially a relegation battling rival, and we should have the quality to beat them. Especially at Ellen Road. The Tottenham loss is a relatively straightforward one. We don't travel well to London, and it's at Tottenham's ground, and that late on in the season, they could be vying for Europe. Well, they're not going to want to lose to Leeds United on their own patch. It could be the difference between them getting a European place and getting no European football next season. So I think that's, it's sensible to put one of the 2 losses next to them, really. These last 2, a little bit difficult to decide. Brighton at home seemed realistic that we might be able to get a draw. It's different to being away from home, travelling all the way down to Brighton. And with West Ham at their ground to finish the season off, again, really depends on how Nuno Santo gets on, doesn't it, really? That could be a huge game in terms of who stays up and who goes down, couldn't it, with it being the last game of the season. And it could involve one or both of West Ham United and Leeds United. It really could. I would really hope that it does not involve Leeds in terms of a relegation battle going into the final game. I want us to be confirmed survived, by that point. But I would think that at that point, maybe a draw is realistic. So there you have it, folks. just, you know, all of this is very hypothetical so early on in the season, but it just got me thinking. So what do you reckon, folks? Are these kind of results realistic? Do you think that Leeds can achieve these kind of results over these individual blocks of 6 games and 8 games to finish? Some of these results are different to what I predicted when I predicted the entire season, but that was before a ball had been kicked. Whereas having seen the first 6 games and seeing what Leeds have been capable of doing up to now, it can give me a little idea of what Leeds could possibly do going into going into all of the remaining games of the season. So, put your thoughts in the comments down below. Let me know which fixtures you think I might have got wrong. Do you think that some of the wins need to be draws, some of the draws need to be losses, or even, you know, losses / wins, and vice versa? You know, let me know. And do you think it's realistic to think that we could keep this kind of form up for the entire season, or do you think that it is going to be more of a case of, you know, maybe 10 wins, 10 draws, and the rest losses? You know, is it going to be that tight, or do you think we might struggle to even get that? I mean, we're already, you know, we've already got 2 wins and 2 draws. We only need 8 more of each, and you know, we're looking decent to that point. So yeah, do please let me know. A big thank you for watching. Do please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and do please give the video a like or a hype, depending on how you are viewing it. But in the meantime, enjoy the rest of your day. See you next time. Bye for now.